right, folks. Welcome once again, everybody, to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with my good buddy, Jamie Uyeyama. If you are watching on YouTube, you will notice that my camera is not working today. I don't know what the heck happened to my camera, but it is not working. So I'm going to have to go purchase a new one. We've tried. We've rebooted my computer. So instead, you get to look at that very handsome Yama there most of the day. And you know, I'd rather look at Yama over me anyway, so it's probably not the worst thing that could happen. But we've been off for a couple of weeks, so we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Before we get going, I want to mention, first of all, it's a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. You can go to irishsportsdaily.com and click on the premium section and sign up. There's certainly a lot that's going to be happening here in the next few weeks. Obviously, there's some recruiting stuff we got to get to. There's not a lot of guys left, but certainly some important guys left. And we'll talk heavily recruiting today. Also wanted to mention our sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing, founded by ND alum Ge Wang. You've seen ESQ on all your favorite Notre Dame players and coaches. From All-Americans to All-Pros and Associates to CEOs, you're in great hands with ESQ's custom clothing. Whether you're looking for a perfect fitting suit, a standout sport coat, or a perfect tuxedo for weddings and galas, ESQ Master Tailors blend traditional hand stitching in each garment with Italy and England's best fabrics. Check out Ge's amazing work at esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention ISD, get 10% off your entire purchase. And really, Ge and our good buddy Matt Freeman are out doing some massive fishing there, Jamie, and they caught some huge tuna fish the other day. They sent us some photos, and it looks like they're having a heck of a time out there.
Yeah, it looked like an episode of Wicked Tuna. Like, honestly, like that was legit.
Massive. I know. They're out there catching some big fish. That was pretty impressive. So they do that every year. They go out fishing, and so this year they went out deep sea fishing. And Matt will be back in a couple weeks with ISD on vacation. Yama, what I thought we would do today is I wanted to kind of go over the commitment list, right? And I wanted to get your opinion, and if Greg wants to chime in as well, that'd be great. We're going to start with offense, and I want to just go player by player, and I want to get your opinion on where you think that they're ranked now and where they're going to be when it's all said and done. Are these players properly ranked right now? Do you think that they're going to be ranked higher when the season is over? All that type of stuff. And I thought we would just kind of talk about how they fit into the roster as well, and each guy's bringing something a little bit different, and how do they fit in with the current roster? So I thought we would do that today. Just kind of a fun little exercise to do. Let's start with Wonder Mons, wonderful Mons, Champ Mons, the quarterback, Vero Beach, Florida, reclassified. Here's what I don't get. I don't understand how you can be the number one quarterback in one class, you reclassify, and now you're a lowly, 4-star, borderline 4-star. How's that even possible? And so to me, I think that the guy is underrated. I think he's vastly underrated. When all is said and done, I think you're going to see his stock rise. And I think part of it is the reclassification. I get it. It's hard to really put these guys where you think they should be, especially because you'd have to knock down a lot of other guys on that. And then with his injury, I think that also kind of throws a little bit of a wrench into it. But at the same time, I think this guy is really, really talented. Is he Deuce Knight talented? I think that there's a chance he could be. We'll have to see. You got to remember, this is still a pretty young kid right now. And just like Deuce Knight made a huge jump, I felt, in his senior year, I have a feeling that you're going to see the same thing with Wonder Mons. But your thoughts here, where do you see him right now as far as his national ranking, and where do you think he's going to end up?
Yeah, I think his national ranking, I totally agree with the reclassifying thing, and then how stupid it is that he would be where he's at. I think it's one of these things too. If it was just like a unique thing where someone was reclassifying and it hasn't been done before, and you had looked at it and they're like, wow, all these guys just ended up being like busts because they reclassified. But last time I checked, Malachi Tony was like the true freshman of the year, and he reclassified.
Yeah.
So it's like it if a guy's good, he's good. Like that's the way that I kind of see it. I think he is really underrated to where his national ranking is. I get because he missed a lot of the last season that he wouldn't be at the top for because of those reasons because you want to see a little bit more from him. I understand from that perspective, but to me, he should probably be easily like a yeah, I think he's like he's like top 250-ish or whatever in the composite rankings. He should be like easily top 200, top 150 right now. And to me, he is one of those guys who, like you said, is going to have that kind of senior season, and just his raw talent where he should end up as a top 100 kid for sure, right? And maybe even a top 50. Like I think that is on the table for him. Like, personally too, I think with this quarterback group that's out there, I think it's like a pretty solid quarterback group, not like crazy quarterback group in general, but I think I mean, I would certainly put him in as one of the top guys in the class, right? Like he's deserves to be like a top 5, top 10 guy in the class for me.
I'm in total agreement with you. I think that he's got all the tools to be a very very talented and successful player. Love his arm strength. I love that. I mean, he takes a lot of chances with the football, but I don't think he takes the kind of chances that we saw sometimes with Noah Grubbs before. But and obviously Grubbs got better at it as time went on. I would rather have a guy who's willing to take chances with a football versus a guy who's not. And one, because you can bench that guy if he's not playing well, and the other is because he's going to take all the chances that he can to be successful. And I just love this film. I think he's really, really talented guy. I mean, you got to look at him right now. He's 6'2", 225 pounds. That's a thick kid. All right. He's probably going to be 230 easily by the time he runs to Notre Dame. And I just think his body and the way he is built is exactly what you're looking for in a quarterback. And I love his arm strength. I think he's got a lot of upside. And I think he's a good take when you look at the situation at Notre Dame now. Noah Grubbs is kind of more of a polished quarterback, more pocket passer. I think Teddy Gerard's kind of the same thing. And then you take a guy like this that the ceiling is just really, really high. And so I'm excited. I think he's somebody that's very underrated. And when it's all said and done, I think you're going to find that that's going to be the case. And I'm very excited about him. Jamie, I got a chance. Over the holiday, I started watching film again, and then I started watching Notre Dame games as well because I'm just getting fired up about the season. But I started watching these guys when I came up with this idea as far as what to do for Power Hour this week, and just rewatching all the players and the two running backs and Isaiah Rodgers and Lathan Wizington. I really like both players. I think both players are a little bit underrated. I wouldn't say that they are, a top 2 or 3 back in the country, but I think that they have the potential to be very, very good players. When you look at Rodgers, I think his floor is very, very high already. He's a big kid. He's already very thick, got good, solid speed. This is a kid who can run the football and run with power. But the one thing I was a little bit concerned about is kind of that stuff right there that we're watching right there. How does he handle himself inside the hole? Can he turn left and can he turn right? And does he have the ability to make people miss in the hole? I wasn't sure about that, but the more I watched, I'm feeling real good about his potential. And I think he's a little bit underrated, as far as a national back goes. But I don't think that he's quite the top 2 or 3 type of back in the country, but I definitely think he's in the top 10. What are your thoughts here on Isaiah Rodgers?
Yeah, I think he's someone who's much bigger than if you're looking at this film now than he was, during his junior season too. So that's another thing to kind of take into account of what you're going to see from him as a senior. Um, to me, I think if you watch his film here and you look at him and you'd say like, this is a good running back. Like he's a guy who, reads it well. He's got some juice, not like a total home run hitter. Like this isn't like you look at here and this is running away from kids in Mass, but
yeah,
that's not running away from guys at the college level. So I want to see, does he have a little bit more juices as a senior? That's something, but he is absolutely rocked up. Like the guy's a massive, massive kid, just huge. And I think there's a lot of like Kaytron Allen to him, right? Like I think he's just a good back and with a kind of a high floor, right? So
yes,
I think he's one of these guys that I don't think he's necessarily he's properly rated, I would say right now. Like I think it's fine for him to be like a lower 4-star kind of kid right now, but I do think he has a chance to move up as a senior.
I agree 100%. And, I think the Kaytron Allen thing is a good comparison too. And, you need players like that. You need guys that you can just rely on and are going to produce every game. And I think that's what you're going to get in Rodgers. With Lathan Wissington, I think this guy's underrated. Let me rephrase that. Excuse me. I think he's probably rated where he needs to be right now, but I think his ceiling is much higher than what it is right now. Kind of reminds me of what I saw in JD Price, from a junior year to senior year, and I think you're going to see the same kind of a jump for him. First of all, this guy's obviously very, very fast, but is he what I would call a natural 100% running back? I'm not sure, but I didn't feel like Jeremiah Love was either coming right out of high school. I thought he looked more like an athlete that became a really good running back. And I think that's what you see with this kid. This kid, he's got that kind of juice, and I think he's certainly got that kind of speed. Will he be Jeremiah Love? I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty tall task for any player, but I think he's got the same kind of traits that you're looking for and the same kind of speed. And, I just think he just needs a little bit more time and a little bit more opportunity. I think you're going to see him really, really rise as his senior season happens. And I think he's another one that's going to be underrated, and wouldn't be surprised if he's a top 100 player when it was all said and done. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, and I think he has like a ton of production over his high school career. Like his numbers at the end of his high school career are going to be ridiculous. Like when you look at like just the overall total of like rushing yards that he's had, and if you just compile, like obviously you're just looking at this highlight tape, well, he's going to have a lot more of these kind of runs where he's just running away from people. I mean, he does have that different kind of acceleration to that point where he had some blazing 100-meter times this spring that I think you just don't normally see from a guy his size as well. So to me, I think he's like 140 in the composite right now. I think that's probably they bumped him up, but I do think he's definitely someone like to me as well. Like JD Price was like super underrated, and then he didn't quite like he moved up, but he should have been moved up more to where his final ranking. I think he obviously proved it. The guy ended up being a first-round pick, but like,
yeah,
I think with Wissington, I do think there's a good chance that he's going to move up, quite a bit, even more. Like I do think he has a chance to be a top 100 kid for sure.
All right, moving on to wide receiver. It's interesting because I think Notre Dame probably could have stuck around and maybe landed another wide receiver, but they seem really content on just landing two. And I think that was kind of a surprise to all of us. And that, boy, if you have a chance to get them. But what I think that says, Jamie, is they're very happy with what they have on campus, right? They don't want another guy because they like what they have on campus right now. And they know that it's going to be hard for another guy to come in and actually play. And when I look at what they landed in Jackson Coleman and in Julius Jones Jr., I think it's exactly what you're looking for. I love Jackson Coleman. I think his upside is huge. You know, I said way back then, he did remind me a lot of a Jeff Samardzija type of guy. And I think he's going to take that kind of a jump when it's all said and done when he gets to Notre Dame. He's going to be a guy who can both stretch the field vertically, but also, be a guy who can make some plays on shorter intermediate routes, but also make people miss. And like Samardzija could. He was just kind of sneaky quick and just had this. He had really good balance, is what Jeff Samardzija had. People would just bounce off of him, and I think that's what you're going to see with Coleman. It's going to take a little bit of time, but they'll have time because I think they have kind of a loaded roster right now of underclassmen. So, for him or Julius Jones Jr. to come in and play right away, I think it's going to be a tough task because there's so many really talented players in front of them. But that's what you want is guys with huge upside like this. And I like Jackson Coleman. I think he's going to be, it's probably going to take 2 years before he plays much. But once he does, I think you're going to see one very special player and a guy who's very underrated, when it comes to the national rankings right now. In the end, I see him also as a potential top 100 player. Your thoughts here?
I think Jackson Coleman is like his rating is insane. Like I have no idea. Like he's like not number 900 something on the composite. That is so stupid. It doesn't even make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. That would make him like the lowest rated receiver that Notre Dame has signed like in a long, long time. There's just zero chance that he doesn't move up significantly. And I guess, maybe because he's from Colorado, maybe because he's white, I don't know, like that he won't really actually move up to the point that he should, based on his actual film, also his speed. Like he has verified speed, like real track speed, and it shows up on film. Like it shows up what he does. He's absolutely a guy who isn't just like, he's not a jump. I think he's actually more of a speed guy than a jump ball guy. And I do agree with you, Mike, that he has like a chance to be somebody who also is not just this vertical threat, but a guy who can make plays like after the catch and do intermediate stuff too. So to me, his ranking is way off right now. He's going to move up. Probably not as far as he should, because they never overcorrect to what it should be when someone is ranked this low. So he might not even end up as somebody who's a composite 4-star. For who cares? He's a blue chip kid to me for sure.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, the ranking. I don't even understand it, but there's no incentive for them to do anything at this point. He's already committed, and so I don't expect him to rise a ton. My guess is he'll probably climb into the 400s, somewhere around there, when it's all said and done. I don't care what it says. I really don't care. I think that this guy's a really talented player, and they got this one wrong. But that's good. I love the fact that a lot of these guys are underrated. And Jamie, many years we've been doing this. There were times where I felt like guys were overrated that we would be talking about. There were a number of those. I haven't felt that way in the last two classes at all. Pretty much almost every guy that they've had, I felt was either pretty well rated or underrated. I really felt like the last couple classes, that's the way it's been. And so can't wait to see what this guy can do when it's all said and done. And again, I think the sky is the limit for him. Julius Jones Jr., I mean, I think he's rated about where he should be. I think they got that one pretty much right. I think he's certainly an explosive player, and he's going to do lots of things. I think his ceiling, I think, is even higher than a Jordan Faison. I really do. I think his ceiling is higher than that. Can he be Malachi Toney? I don't know, but I think he could be a lot of types of players. Lemon from USC. I think that's the kind of guy he can be. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I think right now, if you're looking at a guy who's 5'10", and ranked in the top 100 recruits in the country, I think that's about right. Like
Yeah.
where he's at. Like you could argue he could be a little bit up, but he is someone I think who will have a chance to kind of move up too. But I wouldn't be surprised if he stays right around where he is, because just the nature of his size being kind of counted against them. And I think it's hard. You don't see too many guys um, get that bump up at his size, right? Like, I think, if you look at, say, Amon-Ra St. Brown, who was also, a smaller guy too, he was just so dominant in camps and in so many other settings on best settings that it made it just undeniable that he was going to be a 5-star, right? And Jones hasn't gone to all of these camps and done all these same kind of things to make it that way. So it doesn't really matter. But what matters is he has a chance to be, like you said, he has a chance to be like Makai Lemon level good. Like I think that's like realistic for him.
Yeah, I think so too. I think he's got that kind of upside, and I love the swagger. I love the swagger he plays with, and his dad was very much that way as well. Had a real chip on his shoulder, and so I'm excited to see where he ends up and that type of thing. All right, moving on to tight end Titus Hawk. What are your thoughts here?
I think right now, because him being like, right on that kind of 4-star edge kind of thing, to me kind of makes sense because of, if you think of his frame is, I'm still not sure how big he's going to get. And I think that is my only real concern with him, though, because in terms of like, man, I just love, he's a great athlete. He's really competitive. You can see the way that like he gets after it as a blocker, which you just wouldn't expect for a guy who looks like just like a big wide receiver. I see a lot of guys who are built like him are pretty soft, right? And he is not like that at all. But I think, where does he fit? Like, can he ever be somebody who is going to be an inline guy? Is he always going to be just like a move tight end? What's going to change when he ends up focusing just on football? Because he's like a multi-sport athlete and like a really, really good athlete at that too, like a heck of a baseball player and all that too. So I want to know like kind of what his weight is going to be at down the line. To me, he's more of a developmental guy because of that. So I think, where his rankings at is okay. But he also has the chance to move up too, because of like, if all of a sudden there's more like you see more, because it's just like, well, he's just getting more time playing ball and just focusing on football, now that obviously this is where his thing's going to be, his future is heading. I think you could see him, get a little bump there, but I don't think he's ever going to be quite like where Jackson Dollar is in terms of his ranking or anything, because he's just not built the exact same way.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that's he's probably ranked where he needs to be because of the lack of body development at this point. Again, I don't think it's anything he's done. I just think he's a multi-sport athlete, and it's hard to put on a bunch of weight when you're going from football to basketball to baseball and all those different types of sports. It's just hard to put on a lot of weight, and so it will be interesting to see how his body develops, and whether obviously he's a very good baseball player, so he's not going to stop playing baseball anytime soon. So how quickly can he develop his body and become more of a football oriented type of player, and how soon will he be committed to that, I think is going to be a big say in how fast he advances. I like everything about him. I think I love his nastiness. I think that's important for that position. And so I do like everything about him. It's just it's going to take a while. I think he's at least 2 year down the road, guy. He's going to need 2 years in the program for sure before he's physically ready to play. But they got two really good tight ends last year. and it would not surprise me if they keep going after tight ends in this class. They did want to, so it wouldn't surprise me if they could, if they went after another one and tried to flip a Jackson Dollar or Seneca Driver or something like that. I'm sure they're going to continue to keep pushing for that. All right, well, let's move on to offensive line. Let's start with Richie Flanagan. And again, this is a ceiling thing for me, but I also think it's a floor thing with Richie Flanagan. I think his floor is really high, although we haven't seen it yet. I think what you're going to see in him is this is a guy that if he doesn't start, he's going to be in the 2 deep pretty early, and he's going to be in the 2 deep the whole entire way. This is a kid who's going to be very, very tough, very, very physical, and I think you're going to see him really kind of explode this year. Once we get some film, we're going to see what I think is going to be a very underrated player, and at a knee position. I mean, I love Cam Heron. I think he's going to be a really good player. I rewatched the spring game again yesterday, and just focused a lot on him and Matty Augustine and some of these younger players. And boy, Cam Heron's going to be a very good player for Notre Dame. If he can get his body to where it needs to be, I just love what I see in his development. I think Richie's going to be a very similar type of player where it's probably going to take a couple years, but you're going to have a very good football player. And I think his ceiling is high too, and people don't realize how high his ceiling is going to be as well. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, I think where he's at, kind of because he's kind of ranked as a defensive lineman, I think, by a lot of the sites, and obviously Notre Dame's going to use him on the offensive line. But I do think he could play defensive line in college too. Like I think he's absolutely athletic enough. If you look at like what his markers are in terms of what he's done in track, like just with his throws, like it's insane, like how good his like discus and his shot put numbers are. Like I think it's one of those things that if I see people brag about certain guys and what they've done, and his numbers kind of would blow a lot of that away in terms of what his results are. And certainly like his older brother had really great results too, but obviously he's like a bigger, stronger kid than his brother was, and like a different, his brother was obviously a better athlete overall. But man, I watch him and I think of like, forget about just position wise, whatever. I think of his dad, right? Like I think of his dad, who was all time tough, like one of those guys. Yeah. I think like, and to me, just if you're talking about guys who are certain like Notre Dame linemen, guys that you just think like, man, you could just put in any era and these guys you'd want them on your team. Like you think of Jim Flanagan, you think of like Kyle Budenskak, like those kind of guys. Like I know you feel the same way, of these guys that you could just insert on a team, Kurt Heinisch, whatever, right? That you could just insert on any team and they make the team tougher just by being on it, because they have that. And I think he's got that. And I think he's someone we saw what he looked like on his official visit, and he's gotten bigger. Yes. He's really good size. So I think he might, development, it always takes development in the offensive line, but he might be ready to play earlier than I think even you suggested. Like I think he might be someone that after a year, he might be slated to be someone to compete pretty early, because I think physically he's going to be able to do it. And so when I think of him, I think of like very much like a Nick Martin type, that could be a guy who starts for multiple years on the offensive line, on the interior of the offensive line. And I don't think he's a guy that is someone that you say, well, he can only play center, because I do think he could maybe play guard as well too. So, because there's certain guys they have taken over the years. Because I would say Cam Heron is definitely one of those guys that you just say, well, I think he's going to play center and that's it. Like I can't really see him anywhere else. Flanagan, I could see at guard or center.
I mean, he looks almost legit 6'4". He when he stands next to all the other guys in the photos. So I think he'll have the frame to be 300 pounds in no time. I really believe so. So what I love is his foot speed. And we saw it on a lot of those defensive cuts that Greg was just showing there. Very, very quick, first step for a guy his size. And man, if you can end up, having a move center that can move like that, and that's what I think Cam Herron's very good at. His foot speed's very, very good. And I think you're going to see that with Richie Flanagan too. So very excited about him. James Halter, again, I think underrated. I don't think that he can go much higher, in some of the rankings, and that's fine because I don't see him as a top 50 player, but I do think he's definitely a top 100 player. And the only reason I don't think he's a top 50 player is size. Just size. Can he get to 320 pounds? Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see on that. But I do think that he's going to be a very, very good player, and want to for him and Richie Flanagan. I just they're that's exactly what you want, and just very, very physical, mean players. And I'm very excited. I cannot tell you folks how excited I am about this offensive line class. This is the best offensive line class they've ever recruited, in my personal opinion, in the times that I've been following this. This is just really elite stuff, and there's not one guy, Jamie, on the out of the group that I'm like, why did they take him? We'll get to even Jackson here in a minute. Jackson Hill, we'll talk to him. He's the least ranked, but I like his film too. Especially when I saw some other stuff on X that was different than the film that they have. And so again, I like James Halter. I think he's going to be a very, very good player for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think he's got a chance to be a great player. And when he committed, I believe my comp for him was Peter Skronsky, the guy who was obviously an Illinois kid who Notre Dame wanted, but he ended up going to Northwestern. They kind of got in on him a little bit too late, I think, or they maybe would have got him. But he ended up being a first-round pick. But he was a guy who played tackle in college, ended up moving to guard in the NFL, but could play multiple positions. Well, Halter is someone who played tight end. He's only played 1 year of full offensive line. So it's very similar to Joe Alt in that way, except for Joe Alt was even like a year later, but also too, where his dad is, a former offensive lineman who, is not like an over the top person in terms of, working with them, but working with them enough to know and kind of give him the base and help him, and has really kind of helped him along. And man, he is a big time athlete. Like, one of these guys that just is a rare athlete for an offensive lineman. Like a good enough athlete to play defensive line at the college level. And one of these guys, I legitimately think he could be someone who could start at 5 positions. Like he could go across the board and do that. And I think in a lot of ways, like Anthony Knapp in those ways too. And I think Anthony Knapp is also a good kind of like person to look at as the kind of player he could be, because he's got that same kind of mentality as him. Right. And, I know obviously everybody knows we're big Anthony Knapp fans as well too. Right. And, I think, to me, where he's at, I think he's a top 100 level guy. I think he is a top 100 level guy, I believe, in the composite. I mean, I could see him being moved into, being a top 50 level guy and being that good, but I get it why he wouldn't, in terms of like, when we get to Olu and Simeon, those guys are just built in ways where they're like built different. Right. And I think, Halter doesn't have exactly that. Doesn't mean he could end up being the best out of all those guys. Really is possible.
Well, he's interesting because I remember Jordan Halter telling me that his first pass sets were actually at Invasion. The first time he was at Invasion last
Yeah,
year.
I
That's the
saw
first
them.
time.
Yeah, I remember.
And it's
Yeah.
just like, so that's how far he's come in a very short period of time. And so you cannot teach that athleticism and you can't teach that want to. You just can't. And so I think that his upside is really really big, and it's just going to depend more on how big can he get. I think than anything else. I think he's a very committed player, and so it's just a matter of how big can he get to be, how amazing can he be as a player. So, Jackson Hill, again, I want to call him, I don't mean it as any sort of disrespect because that's not it. I think he's a program guy, right? A guy that is kind of the glue of your whole system. A guy who's going to come in and just work his tail off. Very physical player, wants to hurt people really bad. Uh, to me, the only thing for me, is foot speed. Can you develop some agility? Because if you can develop agility, he could be a very, very, very good player. Kind of reminds me of Ben Nichols in that regard. In that, you know, if Ben Nichols can develop some athleticism, he's got everything that you want as far as his body and his meanness and his nastiness, and he's got everything you want as far as an offensive lineman. But is he going to be athletic enough? That's going to be the big question. We see him at tackle a lot, on film. I think he's a guard in the end, and total program guy. I 100% understand why you go after him, and boy, the more you watch him, the more fun you have watching him because he just wants to hurt people so bad. It's just a lot of fun to watch. I like watching this film a lot. Your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I agree totally with the foot speed thing too. I think that is going to be the one thing that kind of determines, whether or not he can be a starting caliber guy at Notre Dame. And obviously, if you're a starting caliber guy at Notre Dame with how they've recruited the position, you got a chance to play in the league for a long time, right? So if that happens, then I think he can be a really good player for Notre Dame. And I think the program guy is the right way to put it. I would say if you were going to say who he was, you'd be like, he's a bigger Pat Coogan, that kind of same kind of guy, but the same kind of mentality too, right?
Good call.
Where he's somebody that, look at the people that were recruited in the same class as Pat Coogan or around him. He ended up being a better player than a lot of those guys who were ranked higher than them. A lot of it was want to, right? A lot of it was want to. And I think,
absolutely.
Yeah. And I think there was some other guys, we don't need to name names. Everybody can figure it out themselves, but there are some other guys who were kind of scared of the competition at Notre Dame, and didn't want to commit, because even though they saw like a good fit in other ways, they were worried that they were never going to play. And I think Jackson Hill could have easily been one of these guys who's like, he was already committed to UCLA. If he, I haven't looked at all of UCLA's class. I imagine he was, if not the top offensive lineman in the class, right up there as one of the top guys in their class. So his pathway to playing time, a lot more clear at UCLA than it would be at Notre Dame, but he wanted to challenge himself. And also he fit at Notre Dame. Like, this is what he wanted. And I just think when there's someone who makes that choice for those reasons too, they got a really good chance at hitting. They have a really good chance at like hitting exactly what ceiling the player that they can be. Right. So, I think he's definitely got a shot to be a player for Notre Dame. I would say he's like his ranking, like, I don't care what he ends up being ranked in the end. It doesn't really matter because I don't think it's going to be a reflection of kind of like what kind of player he can be, because it's just going to be like if he can kind of overcome some of his limitations. But you mentioned the thing about, you saw some clips on X. Well, I think that was one of the things that I saw too that really kind of like opened my eyes to him is he was going against Marcus Fakatu, who just committed to Ohio State at a camp, and everybody knows that guy's a freak of nature, just incredible athlete or whatever. And I mean, he handled himself really well against Fakatu, and that's somebody that I think if you don't have the right mentality, you can get embarrassed by a guy like that just because of his athleticism, and Hill wanted the smoke. So I'm sign me up for one of those guys.
Yeah. I mean, I think he'd be a 3-year starter at UCLA. I really do. I think that he's got the talent to play at this level for sure. It's just, does he have the talent to play at Notre Dame is another question that we don't know yet. Because I just think Notre Dame's offensive line is going to be so stacked with so much talent. It's crazy. All right. Olu Bobola. What do you think here? I mean, Jamie, it's been a while. I mean, I love Will Black. I love McHugh. I think those guys are really talented players. This guy, I think, is an even better athlete. I just think he's a really, really great athlete, but also has some nastiness to him. And that's what I love to see about his film. He does want to hurt you. But I just think as an athlete, he's just really, really athletic and really, really talented. Your thoughts here?
Yeah, super athletic, obviously like freaky long in terms of just, how big he is and how big he's going to get to. He's got an 86.5-inch wingspan, like at 17 years old. That's insane. And I get, like, to me, he's believe he's a composite, like, top 15 guy in the class. And it makes sense in a lot of ways, because just like you said, like, he is an exceptional athlete. He is scratching the surface of the player he's going to be. And he does have that mentality that you're kind of looking for, because there's a lot of guys that are like really good athletes and, have these physical traits that are exciting, and you can see how it could translate into somebody being a top pick, but maybe they don't have the mentality to be a dominant player, right? Like, you're always picking for projection rather than what they're going to actually be. And I think he's got a chance to actually be like a dominant, like, player in pass pro as a run blocker as well. But I think there's some technical stuff that he's going to take some time with. So he's not going to come in and be somebody who's ready right away. Like, so Black, for instance, a much more polished player than Olu is at this same stage. But I mean, I think when you're talking about him and Will Black and those kind of guys, Kirby Lambert and all them, like, the ceiling's the same. Like, these guys can be super high picks, first round picks, the kind of guys that when you're thinking about, because I'm working on the Miami preview right now, Mike, and obviously they're talking they have to replace Bain and Messidor, Ruben Bain and Akeem Messidor, who were just absolutely dominant against Notre Dame and against everybody last year. Like, well, you got to have guys to block those guys. You have to have a certain level of guys. And Olu has a chance to be at that level, to be like one of those guys that you say, okay, well, you have this guy. Well, our guy's pretty good too. Right. And he's of that level, and he's at that kind of talent. That's where his ceiling's at.
Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. You watch Matthews, the Texas A&M commit, and he has the size right now, and he's certainly more advanced as far as his technique goes. But I think Olu's got just as much potential. I really do. It's going to take a little bit of time. I think he's a better mover. I think Matthews is. Don't get me wrong. I mean, that guy's a great player, and that's a guy who's probably come in as a true freshman and play. Just because he's got the body and he's got the kind of advanced technique right now that he can play very early. But I think that when you look at Olu, his upside's as good as him. It's just going to take longer for him. Where I think Matthews is just probably more of a sure thing at this point. And yeah, he's a good player, no doubt. Speaking of a sure thing, I really think Albert Simeon is as close to a sure thing as you can find too. I really do. I love everything about this kid's game. I'm so excited that he's in this class. and he complements everything that's in this class, as far as what they're looking for. And Notre Dame hasn't had what I would call dominant guards. They've had good guards, but I wouldn't say they've been dominant.
Well, Quentin Nelson, Mike.
Yeah, well, I was going to say since Quentin Nelson is what I'm saying.
Okay.
They've had a lot of good guards.
Okay, I was like,
I like Billy. I think Billy's great.
Sorry,
I think Billy would have been a really good had he stayed healthy. I think he would have been a guy that we could probably classify in that. Especially if he would have stayed healthy and they would have gotten the playoff, I think people would have seen the best of Billy Schrouth. But I think that this guy's got that kind of potential to be just a really dominant player. And I love his want to. I love his effort. I love his body. Everything about this guy. I love his foot speed. I just think he's a really talented player and one of the better Notre Dame prospects that they've had in a while. Your thoughts here?
Yeah. I mean, to me, he's just everything you kind of want in that kind of guy. I think if him and Olu, I would say similarly, you would. I just recall going to the opening, and I can't remember what exact year it was. It was 2015 or 2016, whatever year it was, and seeing guys like Andrew Thomas and Jamari Saylor and I'm forgetting Jedrick Wills, another guy who went to Alabama, and all of those guys. And there was it was just an absolutely loaded offensive line year. And there were so many guys that end up being like top NFL picks and great players in college football. And they just looked different, like just absolutely looked different than everybody else there. Because Robert Hainsey, I remember being there, and Robert Hainsey was a pretty darn good player at Notre Dame. But it was not comparable in terms of just like size and just overall power and just, what they could become, but also the way these guys moved at that. And that's like Simeon and Olu too. Right. But Simeon, especially, man, I think too, I remember, Mike, when Gerby Lambert, one of the things that people said about him was, oh, he's only 280 right now. How big is he going to get? And you're like, look at the size, look at this frame. This guy's going to grow into and just be a monster. And now he's 330 and people just don't even bat an eye because he just carries 330 too, right?
Yes, he does. Yeah.
And that's something I think Simeon is going to be just a monster. Like he's going to be someone who's like probably 320 pretty easy and maybe more. And but also athletic enough to play tackle, long enough to play tackle, but could be an absolutely dominant guard. And when you think about, like, say, putting him and Olu on the same side of the line together, right? And it's a little bit, we never got to see it, but we got the preview of it last spring or whatever, when it was Charles Juguson and Lambert lining up next to each other. And you're like, oh my gosh, look at these two human beings together, kind of like McGlinchey and Nelson too, when those guys were together, and it just looked different and was absolutely dominant in what they've done as well. I think that, when you're thinking about what he could be, that's what it is, right? When you're thinking about a lot of these guys that, developed under Harry Hiestand into like first round picks, top guys, dominant players at their best. Like, I think, he has that potential.
Yeah, I agree. 100% agree. I absolutely love this offensive line class. And I like to, when you look at the class on offense across the board, I just think it's very kind of underrated. I don't see a lot of guys that are maxed out at this point. I really don't see anybody that's maxed out at this point. I think everybody in that offensive class has a lot of room to grow and will need to grow before they play. But I think that the upside of these guys is really, really high. And, defensively, I think it's more obvious, on some of those guys, it's more obvious that they're going to be legit, where these maybe offensive guys, some of them are more projectable. But at the same time, their ceiling is just as high, and very, very excited about it. All right, let's get to a few questions before we close down the show. Let's see. What do you guys think will be more impactful to the success of Notre Dame this year? The Joe Moore award-winning O-line or Hendricks Outland award-winning D lineman? What do you think would be more helpful?
I don't think. I mean, I think you kind of have to have both. Really, I think you can't.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to have someone who wins the Hendricks or the Outland Award on the defensive line. I think but you need guys like Boubacar Traore, Bryce Young, Francis Brew, whoever. Like name some guys. But I would say those guys in particular. Like if you think about those kind of guys, they have to play like they are. Man, these guys could play and dominate against anybody. They have to be at that level. You have to have multiple guys to be at that level to really, win a national championship. And you have to have one of the best offensive line. Like they don't have to win the Joe Moore Award because you could be, the third best offensive line in the country judged by that and still be great. Like it doesn't have to win the actual award. But you need to play offensive line at a certain level to win. Especially when you think about they don't have Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price anymore. And, the backs are good, but you're kind of counting on Gerby Lambert to be who you think he can be at right tackle, who Will Black you think you can be at left tackle. Because guess what? When you're playing Miami again, they might not have Bain and Messidor. They still got dudes. And you have to be able to block those guys. If you can't block those guys, then it doesn't matter. You can talk about toughness or whatever. If you can't block them, it doesn't even matter. It's one of the reasons why Notre Dame couldn't beat Miami last year. And there was other pieces of it too. But the main piece was they got whipped by those two guys, Bain and Messidor, just whooped them and just absolutely dominated that game. So you have to be able to match that. And that's why Miami almost won a national championship last year, because they were so strong on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And that's how Notre Dame is built, to be like that strong on both sides of the line of scrimmage. I know they got great DBs. They got more talent at receiver than they've had and all that. They got CJ Carr quarterback, all of this stuff. But if Notre Dame isn't at that level on both sides of the line of scrimmage, I don't think they can win a national championship. I think the good news is I think they actually have the potential to be both of that.
I think you're right. I think that they have, on both sides of the ball, have the ability to be that. Now, let me ask you real quick. Which side do you have the most faith in is going to be dominant this year?
I would say the defensive line, just because there's just a little bit more proven there. I think there's still going to be, you don't want to just assign and say, well, Lambert on the tackle, it's going to be a second year starting. Well, he's going to be just dominant this year. Or Black is going to come in right away and be exactly who we think he is. I think, you have to wait for it to happen, that it's going to get to that point. And you hope that it is going to get to that point, but it's not something I think you could guarantee right away. Where I think it's just natural to think like Boubacar. I think even if you didn't have Charlie Partridge as head coach, as defensive line coach, and you didn't add him and like how much he can improve Boubacar and all that, you'd still think Boubacar was going to take a big step anyways, based on how he's played, right? And you'd still think Bryce Young was going to take a step. And it's like, what can they do now? And they're better at defensive line than they have been. What can they do there too? So I'm just really excited about the potential of the defensive line, but also like the floor of the defensive line, I think, is very high.
Yeah, I'd agree with you. I think that's where they're at, and it's just a matter of, hey, let's get to the maximum ability that we can get out of these guys, and Boubacar and Bryce Young and even a guy like Keon Keeley, who they're going to need, and how quickly can you get Rodney Dunham up to speed to where he can be a every down type of player. So I mean the potential is just really off the charts. It's going to be so much fun to watch. All right. When is Jugasaw expected back? Just kidding. Well, and I know everybody wants to know this, and look, it's the same thing as it's always been. I do hear the bone is healed, so that's good. But I think he had to go in and get some cleanup stuff done. But then it's just a matter of lifting. But it's kind of like we've talked about over and over and over again. It's just hard to pull somebody out. If Sullivan Absher is starting and he's playing well, and you're 8-0, and then Charles can finally come back. If Sullivan Absher got you there to 8-0, it's going to be very hard to pull Sullivan Absher. Same thing if it's Matty Augustine, right? It's going to be hard to pull that guy, no matter how good Charles looks or whatever. And again, it's practice versus games. It's just a difficult thing for a guy to come in and suddenly just start playing. And no matter how talented Charles is, Charles hasn't played for 2 years. That's just a fact. And so it's going to be difficult for him. It really hasn't been able to lift for a while either, so just to get your body physically ready for something like that, it takes a long time. So will he play this year? Yeah, I think he'll probably play. Will he start at some point? I don't know. I think unless there's an injury or they're not getting the kind of production they want out of that particular position, I'd be surprised if he plays a ton. I just would be. Anything you want to add, Jamie?
No, I think you kind of covered it pretty well there.
Okay. My understanding is that this month the players are doing their own practices with no coaches. What really gets done during this time, and how can it help the team this upcoming season? Go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, so they do a lot. The coaches are involved a little bit during this time, and that's like something that has changed with the rules. It used to be like no contact at all, and you couldn't do stuff, and they've changed that, and I think they're going to even change it more. It seems like they're heading towards more of like some of these like kind of like mini camp kind of things rather than
NFL thing. Yeah.
I think that's the direction it's going. So you're going to see more involvement there. But let's face it too, there's always been one of these things where coaches were like, yeah, I'm not looking, but I am looking, whatever, when it comes to some of the workouts and stuff that's been going on. That happens everywhere. So it's not like they're not involved during that time, but even when it's like player run practices, man, you get a lot done during that time. There's a ton there. First of all, for the guys who come in the summer, there's not that many guys now compared to what it used to be. It used to be like the whole team, everybody who was brand new. There's only like, McKinney's coming in, for example, DJ McKinney, the corner, he's coming in. Well, he's learning the playbook, and he's learning so much, and he's also competing against some of these guys and measuring himself up when they're doing like 1-on-1s, they're doing 7-on-7, they're doing that type of stuff. They're working on things that they're going to apply to when they get to camp. And it's just the way to look at it is all of the stuff in the summer is just a continuation of what they've done in the spring. And they're just building off of that and inserting guys like McKinney, like Ian Premer, who, we've heard one of these things. It's like, oh yeah, he looks great in some workouts. Well, it's not just him in the gym doing stuff. It's like, well, no, they're like working on stuff too. Like he's working on things to learn the offense. And that's why too, one of these things where you wouldn't be able to tell that, oh, it's too much for him now, because he is actually having to learn a lot of that kind of stuff. And this now gives him a chance to at least, he's not going to fully catch up before he gets to August, but he will be able to hit the ground running a little bit more than if you didn't have these kind of workouts. So that's really what it's for.
Yep. All right. Are NIL contracts year by year or multi-year or a variety of time frames? If a multi-year, can a player leave before the end of the contract without penalty? In your best interest, how much of Mike Martin's time is spent on NIL activities? 25, 50%, 75. I think, obviously that's a big part of it. And I think to answer your question, I think it's a little bit of everything. I think some guys have longer NIL deals than others. I'm sure each side has an out. Like if a guy wants to leave after a year, there's an out, but some have to be paid back. All this type of stuff, and it's all negotiated. I think most agents um, would love to have you locked down, for a long time, but teams aren't going to do that either. So yeah, it's kind of like we talked about. You know, are you going to want to pay an offensive lineman $1 million to sit on the sideline for the first 2 years you're there? So that's the situation, and what we found is, let's take, for instance, you pay a quarterback X amount of dollars to come. Well, if he's not playing right away, is he going to get that same amount of money the next year? I think what you're finding out is a lot of these guys, that doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. So most of them are, I think, a year. Certainly some of them are longer, but they have the ability to be renegotiated and that type of thing. And I'll be honest, I've never seen an actual contract, so I don't really know all the details. These are just things that I've heard about it. And I do think that each one's kind of a little bit different, as depending on what's important to the person. Anything you want to add, Jamie?
Yeah, just the only thing I'll add is that it's different for each level of player, right? So there's certain guys who sign as recruits because they have signed their package, that it is going to be a 1-year thing, and it's going to be that, and then they go back and do it all over again when it's the next year. And then there's some guys that they get multi-year deals, right? And like some transfers too. And that's so one of the things with if Darian Mensah, who is at Miami right now, well, he was someone when he transferred from Tulane to Duke, he signed a multi-year deal. So that's why one of the things for him to get out of it, they had to pay back some of the money to Duke because he was getting out of a contract that he had. And I guess technically Duke could have made it a point of it and totally screwed with his eligibility because of the contract that he signed, but they just didn't decide to do it. But then in the same thing too was if you had signed something, they can enforce different things, and it depends on the language of the contract. There's a lot more stuff now involved with kind of setting it up for certain guys to have multiple years, to say if they think that they might get out of it. So Fakatu was somebody that we heard a lot of the things was well, some teams are offering him a 3-year deal and all that, and it's not a lot of guys are getting a 3-year deal, right? Like that, but they're doing that to kind of lock guys in. But there's always, I mean, the one thing with it that is so different than almost anything else is that things can be ripped up and changed very quickly. And you just don't see that same kind of renegotiation in any professional sport the way you do with NIL and college football right now.
All right, moving on. We got a few questions we're going to get to. I thought this was interesting. Walton, Duff, Earl, and Sapp in 2002 versus Moore, Gray, Schuler, and Johnson in 26. If you had to pick 4 guys to start and 4 backups, who are you picking? That's a tough one, man. That's a tough one. It really is. I mean, Tay Johnson's starting for me, and certainly Moore is starting for me for sure. And then I would probably go Shane Walton. And gosh, it's tough between Schuler and Glenn Earl for me. It just is. I don't know. I don't know who I would pick on that. I mean, I think Schuler is probably going to have a better year than Glenn Earl did. Not that Glenn Earl had a bad year. I just think Adon's going to have a really good year this year. So I think after watching the year, I definitely would pick Schuler, but we'll see. That's kind of the way I would pick right now. What would you do?
Mike, that's exactly how I see it too. And I have to say, thanks. This is a great question. I love this.
It really
question.
is. Yeah.
And I have to say too, any chance we get a chance to talk about Glenn Earl, I'm happy. I loved Glenn Earl as a player. He's
a great player.
Great player. underappreciated. Wish he got a chance to play on better teams year in and year out, because I think he'd be remembered even way more fondly than he was. Like I think of guys like him and Courtney Watson and Walton, on that era of those teams, could have been like all-time guys if you think about like kind of how, and maybe I'm just thinking of just in those moments, but they were great players. Loved watching them. And that I would 100% agree with what you did. And to me, it would be a very tough choice between Schuler and Earl. And I don't know if it's just like me being younger and having an affection for those times with Earl or not. So I don't want to say definitively Glenn Earl, but I loved watching Glenn Earl as a player. He was a great player.
And what a great person too. He was a fantastic person, or still is, I'm sure. I haven't talked to him in a long time, but just a really nice person and very, very good player. Very good player. All right. Interesting question. We got two more we're going to get to real quick. Signetti's team won the national championship with much less physical contact during practice. Other coaches have had success taking a similar track. Freeman seems like he takes the opposite approach. Is there anything to be learned for ND from the Signetti approach, especially in regards to limiting injuries and practices? Notre Dame hasn't had a lot of injuries that resulted from practice. They just really haven't. Knock on wood here. We got to hope that stays the same. But I guess there could be something said that if you get hit a lot more in practice, you could be more injury prone in the games. But I think a lot of Notre Dame's injuries have just been happenstance. Lots of pulls. Lots of knees, lots of those things that there's just nothing you can really do about. Anything you want to add?
The one thing that I'll say is that with Signetti and the way they built their team the last couple of years, they're bringing in so many guys that have already had played 1,500 snaps already in their career or whatnot, right? Like they've had a ton of guys they're bringing in who are like 5th, 6th year guys that have played so much ball already that it's not like they still can't develop. They're obviously can still develop, but they don't need to practice in the same way and develop the way, say, the young guys on the offensive defensive line need to develop at Notre Dame, because those are actually going to be the next guys in line for them rather than what it is at Indiana, where they're not developing in the same way internally. And I do think that physical contact in practice, it's really important for the younger guys to really, really, I mean, you'll see that in spring and fall camp too, but really even during the season, you can't just be like, oh, we're going to go shells all the time here. When you actually have to develop the full roster. I think that's that approach. You kind of have to treat it a little bit differently. And I think that's one of the reasons why you've seen so many guys on Notre Dame, even before Marcus Freeman too, right? Where you've seen guys develop over time, that it's just a natural progression for them where you kind of need it. You need that mentality, I think, in practice.
I agree. And I think it also sets the tone for your program as a whole. We are a physically tough football team. And I think that you can't be a physically tough football team if you don't practice that way. So I think that is something that Marcus Freeman believes in. And I think it's working out pretty good so far. So, all right. Last question. Is there any real reason to believe Denbrock will show more variation in both formations and play calling, giving the change in personnel, the extra year in the system for CJ Carr and others? Should we expect an offense to look different than last year, more so than just Carr will pass more? I mean, I think every year your offensive coordinator has to look and see what do we have the best opportunity to execute at a high level. And what gives us the best chance to win games. And so each year that answer is going to be different. And I think that's the job of the offensive coordinator to find out, okay, who's going to be our playmakers and how can we best get them the football. And in this year's team, I think you'll see it's going to be a lot of wide receivers. I think a lot of wide receivers are going to get the ball more than they have in the past. And I think that the running back in Aeneas Williams is going to get the ball a lot more in the passing game than we've seen, because I think he is as elite as you can get as a wide receiver, or a receiver as a running back. He's just very, very good at that. I think you'll see a lot of that. Plus, of course, you have CJ Carr, who, is going to have what I think is going to be a Heisman Trophy winning season. And so knowing all that, yeah, you're going to see him pass the ball a little bit more. I do think you'll see things look a little bit differently offensively, with the way they do things. Anything you want to add, or do you agree, disagree, Jamie?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a little bit of differences, but I, I do, and I'm not saying that this this question, the person who's asking the question is suggesting this, but I do want to push back on any notion that like, oh, they don't really have a wide variation of formations or play calling or whatever. I mean, you ask a lot, especially you ask the players, they have a high volume of stuff at Notre Dame. I would say they run a lot more pro style in terms of just amount of offense they put in compared to a lot of programs that like really kind of keep it simple or are working on like tempo and doing all this. There's so much like pre-snap motion. Notre Dame is one of the heaviest pre-snap motion teams in the country, and Denbrock was the same at LSU as well. They do a lot, and it's a lot, and that's one of the reasons too that with the tight ends, why people are thinking like, well, why doesn't this guy play more, this or that? It's like, you got to really know your stuff, because if you don't know certain things, you can throw off the whole offense. And with CJ Carr, he checked into so many different things last year, and that's great. But it's like, if the other guys in the offense don't know the checks, then you can't run that stuff, right? You can't check into something else. So I think you're going to see probably even more freedom for Carr to check into things. I think you're probably going to see, even though you'll see them throw the ball more in a lot of ways too, I do think you're probably going to see more multiple tight end stuff than they did last year too, because I don't think they really felt like confident. If you think about like Ty Washington as a tight end too, he wasn't like treated the same as when Eli Raridon was tight end to Mitchell Evans the year before, right? Like they did a lot more with that. And this year, I think they probably have like 3 or 4 tight ends that they could probably use. And they're going to be able to do different things for certain games and play heavier in certain games, and maybe even throw out of those kind of formations too. But there's a lot of volume there for Notre Dame, that I think that people maybe you don't notice, because it's like maybe it's not exotic enough for people, but they're going to do a lot of different things on offense, and I'm confident of that too. Just with Carr and how he's growing in the offense, he's just going to do more.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting season, and it's funny. There's a lot of people have thoughts and opinions, and I don't want to say criticisms, but to me it seems kind of crazy when you consider how much they've had to overcome when guys have been hurt, and how do you make this work? And you got a first year starting quarterback, and not a lot of great receivers, and how do you still stay balanced, so people don't just load up on the run, and you still have to be able to throw the football. And so I don't think Mike Denbrock's had kind of like a full arsenal yet. You know what I mean? Like, I've got these receivers I can play with. I've got these great tight ends. I've got the running backs, and now I have the offensive line. I have everything I need. We haven't seen that yet. I think this year will be the year that will be the closest for him to have kind of all the little tools that he needs to really show what the offense can be. And, he won't have Jeremiah Love. He won't have J.D. Price, but the backs are pretty good. and I think you'll have a better group of receivers than he's had in the past. I think this offensive line will be the best group that they've had when it's all said and done. It's may not look that way right away, but I think as the season goes on, this is going to be the best offensive line he's had, front to back. And then, we'll see what happens at tight end. I don't think you're going to have, there's not going to be a Tyler Eifert in this group. That's not going to happen. But there'll be somebody who'll catch 35, 40 balls and be a contributor, as far as the tight ends go. So, it's just been a slow building process, and you just haven't had the same level that you may have had on defense. But I think you're going to start seeing that moving forward, and so it's going to be fun to watch. All right, that's going to be it, folks. I just ordered myself a new camera so on Amazon, so we'll be able to see me next week, I guess. Sorry for that, but hopefully everybody listening out there will still enjoy the show. That's going to be it, and looking forward to another great week, and hopefully we'll get some more good recruiting news this week. We'll see. We got Igwebuike is going to be deciding on the 11th, I believe. Isn't that right? I think it's the 11th. Yeah. So we'll get some news hopefully from that, and then we'll see what happens with Parks, and we'll go from there. Thanks for listening and watching, folks. We'll talk to you next week on Power Hour.